and we are here at Aisha Torah giving a Miami Torah lecture on the Zera Shimshon, the absolute last one for this year. Not because we want to stop, God forbid, we're definitely going to continue, but being that Rosh Hashanah is this week on Sunday night, that would make this week this evening, the last Tuesday night of the year. So we welcome everyone to join us. Anyone who wants to follow along, we are in page 1086 in the blue Chumashim, in the Art School of Chumashim. We are in 1086. Tonight's class, being that it's the last of the year and it's being right before Rosh Hashanah, we are not only going to speak about this week's Torah portion, the Zera Shimshon on Parashat Nitzavim, we're also going to save the second part of the class for some special secrets that the Zera Shimshon shares with us on the mitzvah of Shofar. And we're going to speak about that primarily, and we're in for a treat, as always, from the Zera Shimshon. Just a couple of announcements. I was so kindly sent by the Bet Hora'ah of Avat Shalom in Israel a box of these. These are very special. They are specific laws of the day. This is in English. This is the laws of the day according to the Sephardic tradition, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending. Every single day, what the law, what the halakha requires of one or of the congregation for that very day. This is something very nice. Anyone, I don't have that many left here this evening, but hopefully next class I'll have more. Anyone who would like one can just do a dip or a double dip, and it's all yours, and you can keep it, you can share it, you could bring it to your synagogue, or read it yourself. It's absolutely a gem. Every year they come up with a new one. I was asked, why do they come up with a new one every year? Because it's specific to the day of the week. For example, if a holiday falls out on Shabbat, rather than in the middle of the week or on a Friday, the Eve of Shabbat, so every single year they come up with a new one in order that it's like almost dummy-proof. It's autopilot in order to fulfill the right obligation of that very day. So we have a couple of these afterwards. Everyone will find by the food station a very beautiful card. This card is going to be the candle lighting, the complete candle lighting and Havdalah for 5780. Please take one. We did not make the magnet since we printed so many of them, so a piece of tape will do the job, I promise you, okay? Besides the fact, I don't know about your fridge, my fridge doesn't have a magnet on it anymore. So, in order to stay economically within budget, as well as making most sense of everything, take a piece of tape, put it on. On the back, you'll see over the past 6 months, all of our featured speakers and rabbis that we've had for the Miami Torah Center. These are available by me or at the front over there, and we are about to start. We're going to turn to chapter 30, verse 4. That's going to be on page 1090. There's a verse over here that God is referring to, chapter 30, verse 90. It says, Im yeni dachacha biktzei hashamayim. God says that if your dispersed will be at the ends of the heavens, okay, we're going to explain what that means. Misham yikabetzcha Hashem Elokecha. From there, God is going to gather you. God, your master, is going to gather you. Umisham yikachecha. And from there, God will take you. Okay, let's just repeat that. If your dispersed will be at the ends of the heavens, from there Hashem, your God, will gather you in, and from there He will take you. Okay? Off the bat, we're going to ask two questions the Zera Shimshon addresses, and we're going to beautifully answer them in his ultimate wisdom. Listen to the following. First he asks is, the word misham, from there, if you're looking in the Chumash, is definitely superfluous. It's definitely an extra word. The verse could have very well said, Im yeni dachacha biktzei hashamayim, yikabetzcha Hashem Elokecha. If your people or someone will be dispersed to the heavens, God will gather you. Why does it have to say misham? From there, God will gather you in. That's question number one. Question number two is the last two words are definitely redundant again. It says God is going to gather you in, and then umisham yikachecha, and from there He's going to take you in. What's the difference between gathering and taking? Isn't the whole point that anyone who's drifted off, unfortunately, from God, drifted off from His Torah and His observance, that God's going to bring them back in? What's the double terminology needed? So the umisham from there is superfluous, and then the last two words, umisham mikachecha, that from there God's going to take you, again is extra. It's a couple months ago, or you could say it's going to be in a couple months again, the very famous story of Purim. And there's a villain. And this villain is a nasty, nasty guy. All of the cartoons all make him with these pointy ears and a grin on his face. Definitely not a good guy to the Jews. Do we know who I'm talking about, or do I need to?
Haman.
Okay, very good. Haman. Very good. Yes, where's the Graggers? Haman had a very interesting wife. Well, don't we all, right? Okay. He had a very interesting wife, and he had very, very interesting friends and advisors. Not the type of friends or advisors, and I hate to say this, not the type of wife that you would want. Meaning, when things were going great for Haman, guess who was good and close buddies with him? His wife, his friends, his neighbors, his advisors. But when things, it sounds familiar, unfortunately. Okay, when things took a turn for him, as we were very happy for it, but all of a sudden he's looking right and left and his wife's not there anymore. His daughter committed suicide. Wait, do you remember that story? His advisors, his friends, they're like, they got nothing to say all of a sudden. They did have one thing to say, however. The verse says, Nafol tipol. You're going to fall in front of this Mordechai. They first ask him, so Mordechai, im mizera Yehudim hu? Is he a descendant of the Jews? He said, yeah. They said, you're going to fall in front of him. The Talmud asks, why a double terminology? It should have just said nafol or tipol. Why a double terminology? Fall, O you shall fall in front of him. Okay, it sounds poetic. We're thrilled over the fact. However, is there a deeper meaning? The Talmud says there is, and tells us a fundamental definition of a Jew. A Jew is either very, very, very high and elevated up, or, unfortunately, very, very low. The Jewish people, the Talmud says, is compared to the stars and the sand. This was the blessing Abraham was given to by God. God tells him, come outside of the tent. What do you see? You see stars and you see sand. Stars and sand, what do they have to do with each other? You know, the only thing they have to do with each other is that they are super, super numerous. But they're so different. Stars, they're up, they illuminate. They could be planets or solar systems in them of themselves. And what is sand already? To that, our sages teach us that the Jews are either like the stars or like the sand. We have the potential to be so high, so elevated, so inspired, so successful and powerful like stars, or the unfortunate opposite, land at the bottom, like sand. The Zera Shimshon says, the Talmud quotes a verse in Amos. The verse says as follows, and I quote it for you. I'll read it in Hebrew as well as in English. Nafela lo tosif, kum betulat Israel. Meaning as follows, she has fallen, but will not continue to fall. Raise, O Israel. Rise, O Israel. And this is a verse in Amos saying that when the Jewish people have fallen, and they've fallen so low, there's only one way from when you're on the floor, the Zera Shimshon says. There's only up. When everything gets hard, when you fall down, there's only one thing to do, because you're not staying there. It's not possible. It's to go up. It's like when a ball bounces. Where is the strongest point of impact? It's at the lowest part. The lowest, horizontal, the vertical part. And at that moment, it just bounces right back up. A Jew is the same way. The prophet in Amos tells us, unfortunately, if the Jew or the Jews have fallen, it's okay. They can't fall anymore. Once you're down, quick, rise and get up. The Zera Shimshon with this answers, and he says that what the Jewish people will unfortunately experience when they turn away from God and they turn away from the Torah and they'll be lost, they will be scattered. They'll be all over the world, all over the heavens, and unfortunately lost. To that, God says, Misham. What does that mean in English? From there. No matter how low they will be, God will come in His omnipresence, as almighty, as powerful as He is. There's nothing that's too low or too lost for God to Himself come there and save the person from where? Misham, from there. And that answers our first question of why it says, Misham yikabetzcha. From there God will gather you. But now what about the second question? The question of, okay, so He'll gather you there, then what does He need to Misham yikachecha, and take you from there? What is it like? He's got to gather. Are we like wheat? We need to gather us and then bring us in. Is that what God's doing? Listen to a fascinating concept that Zera Shimshon shares with us. He reminds us, what's the reason why the Jewish people are in exile? The first exile of the Jewish people. Who can tell me when was the first time that the Jewish people went into exile? Egypt. Egypt was the first time. When was that? Well, of course, it's before the coined term of Bnei Israel. However, they were still the children of Israel, the children of Jacob. That was the difference between Jacob and his children compared to Abraham and Isaac. Abraham and Isaac, and even Jacob in the beginning of his life, were individuals, but when it became a whole family, a whole tribe, that already turned us into a mini nation of 70 until they entered the land of Israel, and from there, exponentially growing. What was the reason why the Jewish people ever got or were exiled to Egypt? Anybody? Famine. Well, what caused the famine? God. What triggered for God to cause the famine, to trigger the Jewish people to leave Canaan close and leave to Egypt? Sinat chinam. The Talmud tells us, baseless hatred. It's not only like we all think about, that the second, yes, that's part of it. Part of it. It's not only like the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred, but the first exile the Jewish people ever endured was because of baseless hatred. There we go. The brothers of Joseph, all were very, very jealous of him. They hated the way their father was treating him. And they acted to him in a way which we would want no brother to act to their sibling. By faking, we're going to just, it's okay. Because it just gets me off track.
Sorry.
Don't worry, it's good. It goes back to Adam HaRishon. Yeah, okay, let's go back to They faked like they killed him. They threw him in a pit with scorpions and snakes. They sold him as a slave. They regretted their deeds. They told their father he was killed by an animal. We would not, as a parent, want any of our children to do that to another one of their siblings. Let alone the chosen people, Jacob's very own children. And because of that baseless hatred, the Jewish people were exiled. The second temple, which was worse than the destruction of the first temple, was because of baseless hatred. Even though the first temple was destroyed because of the 3 cardinal sins, which we'll speak about when we get to Shofar, of idol worship, that's idolatry, adultery, as well as murder. Yet the second temple, the destruction, was caused by one and just sinat chinam, baseless hatred. That means when a Jew is not acting with love and care and harmony to another Jew for no valid reason. That's what baseless hatred is. There's hatred, and then there's baseless hatred. That comes, unfortunately, from an evil place, from a place that hurts God, as any parent would be so hurt. You know, if you have your two children, as much as it hurts us when one smacks another and the other smacks another and they have words back and forth, but how much more does it hurt when one is doing nothing and the other one is just coming and pouncing on them? It hurts so much more. And that is one aspect of baseless hatred. The Zera Shimshon says, that's what brought us into exile. Now think about it. Where's the redemption going to come from? It's only going to come from the opposite of baseless hatred. And the opposite of baseless hatred is unity, peace, and love. This is the only thing that's going to bring us back. So you know what the Zera Shimshon says Hashem's going to do? Misham yikabetzcha. From there, God is going to gather you. What does it mean He's going to gather you? He's going to put the Jewish people before Mashiach, before the final redemption. He's going to put us together. What happens when you grab a bunch of things? You grab a lulav and a etrog, a hadas and arava and sukkot coming up in 2.5 weeks. You put them all together. What happens when you put people together? They have to learn how to live together. They have to learn how to be in harmony. So at first there might be a little bit of bickering and biting and yanking at each other. But if you realize you're all in the same boat and you hear in the cabin next to you someone drilling a hole and he says, mind your own business, it's not his own business, it's all of our business. And when God is going to come before the end of time and gather us all, Misham yikabetzcha Hashem Elokecha, no matter how far, how low you are, when the time is going to come, when Mashiach is going to come, Hashem is going to put us all together. He's going to gather us by promoting and helping us with peace, love, and harmony to one another. That's stage 1, part of the Geulah, the redemption. What's stage 2? Umisham yikachecha. And then Hashem is able to take you. He's able to bring you out of the exile. This is a tremendous lesson to us all, the Zera Shimshon says. He says, if you want to bring Mashiach quicker, if you want God to reveal Himself quicker in our own lifetimes, we have something that can hasten that. We can do something to promote that to happen quicker. You know what? Bring love and peace into your lives. Bring it into your family life, into your community life, into work, into every interaction that we have, every relationship. This is primarily with Jews because unfortunately Jews find ways to butt heads. But this is not only to Jews. We are to be or lagoyim. We're supposed to be a light upon the nations. We have a task in this world. We are here to illuminate the entire world through our deeds, through being ethical and moral, upstanding citizens of the countries we live in, caring for the world that we live in, and most importantly, the people that we live with. We, unlike all of this horrible media, or the way anti-Semites or those who are against the state of Israel are, we stand for one thing and one thing only. And that's peace and love. I know that was back in the 60s. But it's true. When there's peace and love and respect, care for one another, anything can happen. Things can break and burn down. And if there's peace and love, we just get back together and build. Or everything can be built and perfect and beautiful. But with the opposite of peace and love, all of that will come down in shambles. We, each and every one of us, can be a part in bringing the redemption closer. I think this is very apropos, coming just a couple days before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, and between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is a time of the year where we go and we approach our friends and family and we ask for forgiveness. And unfortunately, it's become some type of joke. Forgive me, mechila, mechila, machul, machul, back and forth. Forgive me, I forgive you. But what are you asking forgiveness for? I always give the example of the husband who comes back not 20 minutes after work with a 5-minute commute, not an hour after work, but 2-3 hours after work. And the wife asks him, "No, where were you?" "I'm sorry." "Okay." Next day, same story. "I'm sorry." Next day, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Does she want to hear the sorry again? She doesn't want the sorry. She either wants a valid explanation or you to get home on time. So when you come and you ask somebody, "Hey, I'm sorry for what I did to you this past year." I'm not saying to do this with every person that comes up to you, but if you come up to me and say, "Rabbi, I'm sorry," what I really should be doing is, "For what?" Okay, but maybe you don't want to engage in that conversation with everybody. It might be very time-consuming, or you might just reignite a flame. But deep down, if you're going over and asking mechila from somebody, you're asking for forgiveness, unless you know for a fact that you're going to reignite a fight or a flame, don't say what you're saying it for. But if you know that you guys have moved on from there, you could come and you say, "I'm sorry for this, and I'm sorry for the time that I did that, and I honestly forgive you for when you did this to me." That's more meaningful. Again, it doesn't always work, but when it's coming from a place of peace and love and true and genuine harmony, that means so much more than lip service. The same way as we always speak about God doesn't want lip service, your friend, your spouse, your neighbor, your friend, your enemy, doesn't matter who, they don't want lip service either. Your wife doesn't want the lip service of, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I won't do it again. She doesn't want that. Save your breath, save your words. She doesn't need it. No one wants that. So we have the power to help the Jewish and the world cause of bringing the Mashiach sooner, of allowing God to reveal himself in a timely manner. And that's by infusing first ourselves and our surroundings with the most amount of harmony, peace, and love between one another. Going back to the first point of Misham, God's going to come there. It's very hard in life. Sometimes you feel you're on the floor. My daughter was driving her bicycle today, and it just, thanks to my neighbor, I can't take the credit for teaching my own daughter how to drive a two-wheeler. I could partially, but I could give my neighbor most of the credit until you had to change in for a stronger back, right? So she's driving it, and I was so amazed how she didn't fall. Her knees were beautiful, perfect, no scraped. I remember when I learned how to drive a two-wheeler, they were all scraped up. So today, I was in my office preparing the class, and she comes in with a little tear, and she's like, "Daddy, I fell off my bike." So one part of me is like, okay, she's human, okay, it's good. Another part is I look at her knee, and thank God it's not bleeding, but it's scraped up. So a child has a choice when they fall off a bike to stay on the floor in the dirt and cry and bleed, or get up and go for help and get up and try again. We all have our two wheels, and we all pedal, and we sometimes fall and scrape our knees. And sometimes more than just scraping a knee, it could be scraping an elbow. It could be many other things. I always tell my children, make sure you wear your helmet when you bike. Oh, and they look at me like, oh, my neighbor's not, and my friend's not, and this one's not. But you know how I make sure they do? Because I tell them a true story that happened to me. When I was a teenager, a wild teenager, and I was driving in a park, I took an abrupt stop. And I stopped with both, but for whatever reason, my front brake took it stronger, and I flew right, imagine, I'm sure many of this happened to many of us, can't only be me, flew right over, Superman style, over my handlebars. And I had a helmet on, thank God. And my parents always told me, better wear your helmet. I didn't believe them. I didn't think it's important. I got up after having a direct head hit fall on the ground, and my helmet was cracked in two. I don't know if that's happened to anyone over here, but that is it's happened? It is so important. When they say that your skull can crack and the helmet will crack instead of it, I lived it. We have a choice when we fall and when something breaks and when we hurt ourselves. I say it's a choice, we almost don't have a choice, but we kind of have the choice to sit and sob and depress and bleed and cry, or get up, as the prophet in Amos says, rise, O Israel, get up and try again. This is a lesson we all have to learn. Misham, from there, no matter how low, God is going to take you out. He'll not only take us out as the Jewish people in the time of Mashiach, but in our own lives, in our own exiles and salvations. He will be there to take us out. So take him up on his offer. Don't sob about it. Learn from your mistakes. Grow from your mistakes. But keep on going. As soon as a person stops, it's the beginning of the end. Let's move on to the next piece of the Zera Shimshon on this week's Torah portion. It can be found in let's find the page. It's in chapter 30, chapter 30, verse 14. It's on page 1092. This is a very famous verse, and the way the verse is constructed, we're going to have an obvious question that Zera Shimshon is going to address right away. It says, Re'eh natati lefanecha. God comes and he tells us, again, this is the closing of the Torah, so there's a lot of powerful lines in these Torah portions. God says, look, I've presented in front of you today, et ha'chaim ve'et ha'tov, life and goodness, and on the other hand, ve'et ha'mavet ve'et hara, and on the other hand, death and evil. Okay, pretty scary. The Zera Shimshon quotes the Talmud. The Talmud says that in a time of unfortunate famine and plague, can you imagine living in a country or in a city where there's famine and at the same time there's plague? Which of the two is a greater necessity to be fixed? The fact that there's no food, or the fact that there's a plague and there's an epidemic and that needs attention? Which one would you say? Guesses? Food. Why? Very good, very good. The Talmud says exactly like you. The Talmud says, pray extra strong for the famine. Because if there's no food, there's no life. If you're not alive, you can't take care of the problem. First you want to eat and live, and then you'll take care of the plague, you'll take care of the epidemic. If so, the Zera Shimshon asks a fair question. He says, what's this option of life and good versus death and evil? If you already have life, well, isn't it good? Shouldn't it be good and then life? And then on the opposite, death and then evil? Isn't once a person passes away, isn't there no more suffering? Isn't all evil away? The Zera Shimshon proves that this verse is talking about in this world. It's not talking about the next world. We know that there's a part 2 to this story that we're all living in, okay? But this verse, he proves, the Zera Shimshon, is talking in this world. There's life and good, and there's death and evil. He seems to be saying that the verse should be switched. It should be good in life, and then evil and death. Because if you're alive, so it's good. And if you're dead, so then there's no more evil. Hear the question? He answers one at a time. He says that a wicked person, we know this from the Talmud, a wicked person in their lifetime is considered, can anyone finish the line? Dead. A wicked person, they might be living, breathing, they're dead. The Talmud actually says the opposite about righteous people, tzaddikim, that even when dead, they're really alive. We learn this from Jacob. Amazing, huh? Family influence, blessing on the Jewish people, their namesake, their morals and ethics live on forever. The Zera Shimshon says that if a wicked person is dead while they are alive, then their prayers are also no longer answered. It's a very scary thing that a wicked person, God doesn't pay attention to. It's not to say that they may not be blessed, they may not be breathing, they may not have a lot of money, they may have all that. They may have a lot of things going for them, but they're shunned away from God because they pushed God away from them. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon says, when we come to pray, there is a prerequisite, there's a step before opening our mouths and speaking to God that we need to do. Because face it, none of us Very few people in the world are righteous, are tzadikim gemurim, complete righteous people. Everyone has something they're working on. Whether it's between us and God, whether it's between us and our fellow, us and ourselves, no one's perfect. So how does a person come and speak to God and make it powerful? This is so apropos to this coming week, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What are we doing most of the day? We're praying. We're speaking to God. Listen to a tool that's going to help us have our prayers heard in a much stronger way to God. Even though the Talmud says that normally to go to the king, you need to go to his castle, go to his inner chamber, and have an audience with him. However, in Elul, and specifically in the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the king comes out of his inner chamber, comes out of his castle, and is in the fields. He's in the fields and he's available to everybody. But still, if he's there, don't you want to be heard? Don't you want him to pay attention? Don't you want an answer? So listen to what the Zera Shimshon says is step 1 before prayer. And that is the concept of teshuvah, repentance. The verse says, Vishav virafalo. First you come back and then you will be healed. Teshuvah is just the willingness to want to come close to God. There's so many more concepts to speak about on teshuvah, but just the word shav means to come back. If your child wronged you, if your spouse wronged you, and they're coming back genuinely, shav, they're coming back, are you going to reject them? That's not heartful, that's heartless. God will not reject any one of his children if they are coming back. So the Zera Shimshon says, step number 1 is vishav. Return to God. Try to reinitiate that relationship. Reconnect. And then, virafalo, he'll answer you. He'll heal you. You want your words to be heard? Take yourself out of the unfortunate category of being a rasha. Not because we intentionally are wicked people. We're all struggling in our own ways. Get out of that. How do you get out of that? Accept genuinely that you want to take steps towards God this year. This year, 5,780 years after the birth of Adam, Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of Adam. That is what we want to do. We have another 365 days that's going to be for the year 5,780. What are we going to make of that year? How many steps are we going to take towards our Creator? That's what we got to start thinking of. So, when he says, Et ha'chaim ve'et ha'tov, life and good, what's the first thing we need to ask for? We need life. You can't have good if you don't have life. It's like the famine and the epidemic. You first need simply life. If we look at our prayers on Rosh Hashanah, and again on Yom Kippur, what are we asking for in the 4 times, in the 4 editions in the Silent Amidah? Zochrenu l'chaim, kotvenu l'chaim. All we're asking for is life. Besides for the last one where we add all the extra stuff which we really, really want, but there's a prerequisite. There's a very basic thing we need from God to continue, and that's life. Our main goal on Rosh Hashanah is twofold. Number 1, it's coming to the realization and crowning God as our King on ourselves and the world that we live in. And number 2, just specifically, begging for life. The type of life God's going to give you, that's up to Him. We try to do the best for ourselves. But we just need life. The book of life is open on Rosh Hashanah. Yes, in life there's a lot of subcategories that we need and that we think we can't live without. God sometimes, always, knows better. So that's the concept, chaim v'tov. First is life. When you see a person, God forbid, on the floor and they're bleeding or they're not breathing, before cleaning off the dust of their shoulder, tying their shoelaces, making sure their glasses are straight and their makeup and so many other things. Stop the bleeding or get the person some oxygen. We are the same in the world that we live in. First life, and then the good will come. Now the opposite. The other option, unfortunately, is hamavet vetara, death and evil. I'm going to say something which is sad, it's gloomy, it's maybe not something we all want to hear, especially compared to what I've spoken about and what I'm going to speak about, but it's a fact of life. The Zera Shimshon says that it seems from this verse, like I said, that it's talking about in this world. Not in the world to come, because we know that in this world we do, in the next world we're judged. We could be judged for the good, it could be judged, unfortunately, for the negative based on our deeds. But it's talking about this world. So he says, in this world, there's two ways to die. One way is unfortunately through suffering, pain, humiliation, dragged out over a long period of time. And there's another way, which maybe for family members, and this is all up for debate, could be harder. There's quick and fast. That's sad. But the Zera Shimshon says it's a blessing. Can you imagine the two options? And we've all went through this either firsthand or with another friend or acquaintance of someone going through a life-changing event that leaves them, God forbid, in the hospital for months, for years, for decades. And then they have to be treated, unfortunately, like babies and have to be tended to. It's very hard for the family to see their parent, their friend, their family member deteriorate as such. So what we are to pray for, the Zera Shimshon says, is not only, he changes the whole verse, he says, not only do we need to pray for a life of good, but we also need our mavet, our day of passing, at 120, whenever God decrees it, to also be good and not evil. Meaning to be quick and fast, with no suffering. Now, what's going to be? It's up to God. It's all planned out. Those who suffer along with their passing, it's to make it easier for them in the world to come. But truly righteous people, the Talmud says there are very few, that passed away through neshika, literally the kiss of death, a kiss from God. And this is something which we try to perfect in our lives, to be that great person that hopefully will have a life of good while alive, and even on our way out, something which is not pain and suffering for ourselves, and most importantly at that time, as any of you who've either had a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent go through those times, say that they just don't want to be a burden or a hardship on their family. It's very, very hard. I don't want to harp on this. However, we should always pray, not only for ourselves, but our family members, that we will have long, healthy, happy lives from beginning until the end, including the end. We're now going to move over to a very special treat that the Zera Shimshon shares with us on the Shofar, being that we will be blowing the Shofar this coming week. It's going to be Monday morning, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and Tuesday morning, the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Before we see the Zera Shimshon's secret chidush, secret novelty, we're going to first understand a couple basics about Shofar, which many have to ask about. And I'll be honest with you, before I learned about this, I was also embarrassed to ask these simple questions about this awkward trumpet wherever you go, looks different, sounds different, makes me feel different, and why, and what. We're going to do a couple basics. And I think one of the greatest breakthroughs of tonight, just in the ABCs, the Aleph Bet of Shofar, that we're going to reveal tonight, this is before the Zera Shimshon, besides for the Zera Shimshon, is the amount of times we actually blow. until a person knows where this development came from and how many blasts are actually made and heard, everything seems very, very like, is this random? Is this the same in every synagogue? The answer is it should be, if it's done correctly, okay? The Torah tells us 3 different times about the blowing of a shofar. Twice in reference to blowing it on Rosh Hashanah, and once in reference to blowing it on Yom Kippur of Yovel, of the Jubilee year. The Talmud says, well, since it's so scarce and so unique that the Torah even speaks about the blowing of a shofar, I'm not talking about silver trumpets, right? We have that elsewhere. We're talking specifically about a shofar, that let's unite them, and anytime it's blown, it needs to be blown the same way. Meaning, since it's said 3 times in the Torah, whether it's on Rosh Hashanah or on the Jubilee year, it is to be blown 3 times. Okay? So we just got, I'm building up the numbers for you, because I think that's going to be the biggest breakthrough. We got from a simple obligation of blowing once on Rosh Hashanah, because it's Rosh Hashanah, to now we're already at 3. How do we get to 3? Because the Torah speaks about blowing a shofar 3 times, and the Talmud says, let's group them all up. We blow it 3 in packs of 3. Okay. There's something else that the Torah tells us through the verses, is that a blast of a shofar is preceded and followed by a long blow as well, a longer blast, as we call it to be a tikiyah. That's the long blast. So if anyone's following in the math, if I have 3, this is still easy, it's going to get a little more complicated. If I have 1 which turned to 3, okay, and now I have 1 before and after, what does that give me? Total of 9, okay? Let's make stuff even more complicated. No, you're not done yet, you're not gone yet. We're at 9, okay? That blast, believe it or not, that middle blast, the Talmud says, because of the years of our exile, we've lost the exact transmission of what that blast is supposed to sound like. Is it more like a chuckling, or is it more like someone trying to gasp and catch their breath? In other words, is it 3 medium blasts, or is it 9 trying to catch your breath blasts? Okay? And, to top it off, it could be a combination of both. So let's take a basic series of what the blasts will look like. You'll have the beginning one starting with a long blast, tikiyah, ending with a long blast. And now in the middle, to fulfill the opinion that it might be a combination of both, we have 3 medium blasts and 9 mini ones. Okay? And then that has to be done 3 times over. Because we said that according to the Torah, it needs to be done 3 times. So that will give me a total of 12. How did I get 12? 1, and then 2 in the middle, and another 1, that's 4, times 3 is 12. The next series is going to be, well, maybe the middle one is only the 3 middle medium blasts. So that's long, 3, long. Do that 3 times over, that's 9. Okay? Then maybe it's long, 9 little ones, and then long, 3 times over, another 9. Anybody quick with math? 9 plus 9 plus 12 gives me 30. Okay? That is, according to the Torah, according to our tradition today, the absolute basic minimum listening to the shofar that we are to listen to on Rosh Hashanah, the day God commanded us to listen to it. Okay? Now, so that only got us those 30. Most of us will pay attention. There's actually 100 blasts blowed on Rosh Hashanah. So when are those done? Depending on which synagogue you're going to attend, there's a Sephardic tradition and there's an Ashkenaz tradition. The Sephardic tradition is that another 30 are going to be blown in the middle of the silent prayer of Musaf, and another 30 are going to be blown during the repetition of the Musaf. and another 10 are going to be recited by the last Kaddish at the end of the Musaf. The Ashkenaz tradition says keep it the same, but we're not going to interrupt the silent prayer. Rather, just do it during the repetition and after the repetition of the Musaf. But whichever way you cut it, we have a total of 100 blessings. 100 is a wholesome number. 100 is coming complete to God. It's greater than 30, right? 10 is a great number, 30 is a great number, but 100, we've spoken about this before, is a complete and wholesome number. It's a three-dimensional aspect of the number 10. Okay? Even though 10 times 10, but it's still, okay, we'll put it like this. It's three-dimensional of the number 1. Right. Let's put it that way. Having said that, where does this shofar come from? We have a couple shofars over here, just to give a couple examples. A shofar comes from a very specific animal. The Talmud says it has to come from a kosher animal. Traditionally, we use from a ram's horns. Okay? And they don't look exactly like this when they're on the head of the ram. They're a little more pointy. They're a little more round. They're not so polished. Okay? They're not hollow. There we go. Earwax. And this is what Moses told us to blow with on Rosh Hashanah. Now there's a very unique characteristics and features to this shofar. Number one is that it's bent. Rashi tells us in the Talmud that it's bent just like when a person prays to God and is bent over. Their face is down. We come in humility to God on Rosh Hashanah when we blow the shofar. It's specifically from a ram and not from a bull, because a bull, the Talmud says, will remind us of the golden calf, and we don't want to give God any memory of that sin. We're coming to ask for forgiveness. It's like if you're coming to your parents and asking for forgiveness for something you stole. So you took their car without their permission. So you're returning their keys, but then they see, giving you a bad example, a pen of theirs, a Mont Blanc pen of theirs in your shirt that you took from them without permission. You're like giving them bad taste to the concept of forgiveness. So therefore we take from a ram which also symbolizes and reminds God of when Isaac was swapped for a ram by the Akedat Yitzchak, by Abraham's 10th and final test. For these reasons, we use a ram's horn on Rosh Hashanah to appeal to God. We're not going to go through them now. However, if you text me personally or Bli Neder, I'll try to post it on Facebook. There are 10 reasons, no less than 10 reasons, that Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon gives for the blowing of a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And just to mention maybe one or two, is just as a king is crowned at the beginning of their reign, when did God become king over the world? Well, you might claim and say, well, when he created it. Wrong. There's no such thing as a king without a subject. Who was God's subject? Adam. When was Adam born? On the 1st of Tishrei, 5,780 years ago. So we are blowing the trumpets of the king, reminding ourselves and recrowning him, putting him back up at the top of his reign for ourselves. Obviously not like he needs it. It's for our own awareness at the beginning of every single year. It also reminds us of the shofars that were blown at Mount Sinai. And it's a good time of year to recommit ourselves to the Torah as we committed to God and His Torah at Har Sinai. And there are multiple other reasons why the shofar is blown and why specifically a ram's horn. If you take a look, we'll spend just a moment to look at the different type of shofars. These are all ram's horns, but as we see, they come in different colors. They come in different sizes. The mouthpieces, as you see, I'm going to just show for the camera, are unique. Look how big this one is. This one is rather hard to blow. Okay, there's one which is very thin, Look how thin that is. Okay, so you got to like almost like stick it in your mouth when you blow. You have one which is a little more medium. You have another one. Each of these shofars give a different sound. Maybe this one gives a lighter pitch. With your permission, can I do? Yeah? Anybody? Okay, watch your ears. Listen to the different pitches, okay? So that's going to be blown for the first time 3 times over. And then, let's just do with another one just for the sake of different sounds. This next sequence is going to be done 3 times over. Besides for the pitch, did you see the difference? It was 3 in the middle instead of 3 and 9. And then the last sequence. Sorry. So they each have a different sound. Every shofar, for any shofar blower, has a story. When you got it, where you got it, how much did it cost, how much practice did you put into it. So each of these shofars means something to me. And it should mean something to anyone who blows the shofar. But I have news for you. The blessing that is recited over the blowing of the shofar is not, "Blessed, O God, our Lord, for giving us the mitzvah, the commandment of blowing the shofar." It's "Thank you, God, in giving us the mitzvah to listen to the shofar." Not everybody needs to blow the shofar. You only need one person in the congregation to. And listening to the shofar is the absolute requirement that is needed, even for the blower. If theoretically it could be heard without being blown, well, that'll be good too. Obviously one person needs to blow, but it's listening to the shofar. I don't know if it gives you the same feeling, but these blasts, it's like a siren. It goes deep into one's heart. You almost are shocked. But there's more than that. It's also like a cry. And this is the beauty of the shofar. And this is what we're going to get into the Zera Shimshon. But before we mention the Zera Shimshon, this is a cry without words. When your child or when your spouse is crying and they're saying words at the same time, you're overwhelmed. You don't know what to listen to, which emotions to pay attention to. But you know what means more? A cry without words. And this is the power the shofar has and gives us. It's a cry out to God, a plea to God that has no words. Because each of us in our own lives are desperate to find God, to be with God, to have answers to our questions that words cannot quantify them. I'll mention one more thing before we move on to the Zera Shimshon. I had the opportunity this week to listen to live Rabbi Eli Mansour, one of my great teachers, someone who I'm very close with. I'm sure many of you know him. Absolutely amazing. And he said one more amazing thing about the shofar that was new to me. I never thought of it this way. He said, the mouth of the person coming to blow the shofar, can anyone come and say that their mouth is squeaky clean? When I say squeaky clean, has anyone ever gone up and said, I have never spoken ill or slander or raised my voice or derogatory or cursed? Can anybody in the world ever get up and say that? Find me the person, okay? I haven't found them yet. No. And therefore, just as we're not going to use a bull's horn, because a bull reminds God of the sin of the golden calf, how can this mouth, who doesn't always speak squeaky clean, who has not always been squeaky clean, how can I speak to God on my behalf, on anyone's behalf? It's the same mouth which cursed, the same mouth which spoke ill, slander, embarrassed, hurt, screamed. How can it be? This is why the most important part of Rosh Hashanah, besides for it being an unconventional ritual that takes place on Rosh Hashanah, being the shofar, but it's the strongest because it transcends words. It gives us an opportunity to appeal to God in a way which bypasses the mouth. Obviously, the mouth is involved, but it's not speaking the way one can speak good or opposite. It's blowing air into something else, allowing the scream and the cry go directly up to God. Now listen to what the Zera Shimshon says. He quotes a verse written by King David in Tehillim, chapter 81, verse 4. It's a famous verse. It says, Tik'u b'chodesh shofar b'kese leyom hagenu, which means, blow the shofar at the moon's renewal at the time appointed for our festive day. So as we explained, which is the only day of the year that we have an obligation to blow the shofar. We don't have Yovel, Jubilee year. We do not have the temple. It's only on Rosh Hashanah. Whether we blow all Elul not, all long or not, whether it's during the Slichot or after the prayers, the only obligation to hear it is on Rosh Hashanah. Comes Zera Shimshon and says, why is King David referring to the blowing of the shofar, or the obligation of blowing the shofar, to Tik'u b'chodesh, in the month of? It should say Tik'u b'yom, on the day of Rosh Hashanah. I don't know about you, Rosh Hashanah is 2 days. It's not a whole month. Why does it say Tik'u b'chodesh, in the month, and not Tik'u b'yom, blow on the day of Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is not a whole month long. Listen to what the Zera Shimshon answers. He quotes a midrash. The midrash quotes 2 verses and puts the 2 together in a very, very special way. The first verse is in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 24, and this is the first mention in our Torah of the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. Listen to the verse. It says, Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor. God tells Moses, speak to the children of Israel to say the following. B'chodesh hashevi, on the 7th month, be'echad lechodesh, on the first day of the 7th month, yeh lachem shabbaton, it's going to be a holy day, it's going to be a holiday. Zichron teruah mikra kodesh, it will be a day of remembering the blowing, actually blowing, a very holy day. The holiday of Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Next verse the Midrash quotes is another verse in Tehillim, in Psalms. Chapter 89, verse 16 says as follows. Ashrei ha'am yodei teruah. Praised is the nation which knows how to cry out with the shofar. The Midrash says, 1 second. So we have an obligation to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Okay? When is Rosh Hashanah? It's not the first day of the first month. Really, according to the Torah, the first day of the first month is Nisan, when the Jewish people left Egypt. You know when the first day is? You know when Rosh Hashanah is? It's the first day of the 7th month, Tishrei. You count from Nisan, Tishrei is the 7th month. Okay. And now the Midrash asks, what's this idea? Praised is the nation, referring to the Jews who knows how to cry out with a shofar? Are you telling me that a Gentile can't pick this up and make noise? I can find you plenty of Gentiles who can. I can find you plenty of Jews and Gentiles alike who can't. Was it almost 6 years ago? You can give me any shofar, any mouthpiece. I couldn't get anything more than a out. Literally. Okay, now I played piano as a child. I messed around with the harmonica. But nothing more than. And if I tell you the amount of hours and hours and hours and guidance and being stubborn for the good to work on never giving up, on learning something that you want to learn or doing something you want to do, it will come. It will happen. If I got a nickel or a dime for every hour I put on this, I'd be very, very wealthy today. And it's a joke, obviously. But we can never give up because it's all worth it at the end. All of our efforts worth so much more. I connect to the shofar so much more than someone like my son, who's 8 years old, God bless him, who picks any of these up and blows them as loud, if not louder than me. Go figure. The kid's lungs are this big. I could put my hand around his waist. But because of the effort I put into it, it means so much more to me. It's a lesson for us all. But going back to the shofar, if a Gentile can pick this up and blow as well, why are we praised for knowing how to blow a shofar? Why Ashrei ha'am yodei teruah? Praised is a nation who knows how to cry with the shofar. What does that mean? So, it says as follows. The Midrash says, you know what it means? It's not the sound that a shofar makes. It's the outcome of what a shofar produces. What does the blowing of a shofar produce? It promotes the Lord Almighty to get off of his chair of judgment and go sit on his throne, his chair of mercy and compassion. How this? Well, we said it reminds God of the Akedat Yitzchak, of Abraham willingly coming and wanting to sacrifice his son. It reminds him of the creation. It reminds him of us being our king. It reminds him of receiving the Torah. This activates God getting up and going over. But it's not the noise. It's the intention. It's our kavanah, as we say in Hebrew. It's in our hearts. It's what we feel, what we think of when we blow the shofar. This is a tremendous weapon, to the point where it's a weapon, and like all weapons, is supposed to be covered at all times. Opposed to when blowing or when learning about shofar is always covered. Look at this. Look how many bags I got over here. Each one has its own bag. A shofar is a secret weapon. If you have a secret weapon, if you had kivyachol, elef avdalot, a million of a change, if you had a lamp that when you rubbed it, a genie came out, would you leave this out in the open? This is our lamp. Kivyachol, as if. This is our secret weapon. If you have a very, very sharp samurai sword, anyone who's into martial arts or into Japanese or Chinese history, a sharp sword is never left out of its case. It's only drawn when to kill. It is wiped and put back. The shofar is our secret weapon. It's not the sound. It's what it does. And we're so lucky, praiseworthy, King David says, is the nation who has this and knows what to do with this. Now what does it mean, the Zera Shimshon says, the 7th month when the Torah tells us? Is there more than the 7th month? Listen to a fascinating explanation the Zera Shimshon says. He says, how do you say 7 in Hebrew? Sheva. Sheva is also similar to another word. Savea. Savea means to be satiated, to be complete, to be full. You know what month is the most full of mitzvot month of the year? The month of Tishrei. You have Rosh Hashanah with all of the prayers and the shofar. You have Yom Kippur with the fasting and the forgiveness. You have Sukkot with the sukkah, the hut, along with the 4 species. You have Simchat Torah, the finishing of the Torah, starting the new Torah, rejoicing. You have Shmini Atzeret, the last day as well of the holiday, of the whole sequence. There's no other month that is as full as the month of Tishrei. But the Zera Shimshon says there's another concept. He says we know there's a concept of God giving merit and reward to the Jews even on something that they have not done yet and they're going to do. We have a track record. Every single year of our lives, We go, we hear shofar, we fast, we build the hut, we shake the species, and we finish and we start anew the Torah. At the beginning of the month, on the first day of the month, on Rosh Hashanah, the Zera Shimshon says, God allows us to do the unthinkable of having him get up off of his chair of judgment and go sit on his chair of mercy through blowing a shofar. Really? Through blowing a shofar, is that good enough to get him to do such a drastic move? Answer is no, the Zera Shimshon says. But you know why he does it? He allows this powerful weapon work in merit in what's going to follow during the whole month. And that's why the verse says, Tik'u b'chodesh shofar. The shofar is going to draw merit of all the good and all the mitzvot that are going to take place all month long and make that drastic, life-changing move of God getting up of his chair of judgment, going on sitting on his chair of mercy from the first day of the month using our secret weapon. How lucky are we that we're able to come to Rosh Hashanah knowing what this special weapon does. So many don't know. Share it. Let people know. Don't talk about it during the blowing of the shofar. You're going to lose your own concentration. You're not going to be able to pay attention. You're not going to be able to connect to it. Connect to it and help others connect to it by telling it to them before. Before I blow the shofar at Rosh Hashanah, no matter where I've blown, I always take a pause and get people into a couple minutes of the mode of what we're about to do. And the obligation and the fulfillment and the concentration and the intention. It means so much. We spoke about this a couple weeks ago, the power of making a blessing, the power of verbalizing. The reason why we make a blessing on something, besides for food, but any mitzvah, commandment we're going to do, is to take that action and to verbalize it. Make it real. It's kind of like a pause. It's like, does God need me to make a blessing before I blow the shofar? He knows. It's protocol. God, every year on the first day of the year, I blow this, you get up and you go. Very good. Why do I need to make a blessing? Is the blessing for God? No, the blessing's for me. So I stop and I pay attention. Hey, something grand is about to happen. So make sure that we try to help others connect as well. One last thing I wanted to mention, and I should have said this before, and this was relating to the destruction of the first temple. The first temple was destructed because of the 3 cardinal sins. Idolatry, adultery, and murder. The 3 sets of 30 that we do are each corresponding to the evil, not only corresponding, they're corresponding and going to slay the evil inclination on those 3 cardinal sins. The first, going and slaying the evil and the evil inclination on idol worship. The second, going and slaying the evil inclination on idolatry. And the third, the evil inclination on murder. And the last 10, that extra bonus 10 to give us a full 100, is there to destroy, and this I think nowadays is our greatest test of all, the evil inclination against Lashon Hara. Evil speech, speaking slander. Can we imagine when putting the mouthpiece of the shofar on one's mouth, blowing with one's mouth and tongue, please asking God to help us and to spare us as individuals and as Jews as a whole to not have the temptation to speak slander. It is sometimes, if you think of it, it's ridiculous how tempting it is. Just for a juicy piece of information, just to hear something negative about someone, just to say fresh news off the press, no one else knows this, you're the first to hear this. How excited are we to hear that or say that? It's ridiculous. It's stupid if we think about it. It's like, is it worth it? But in the action, in the moment, it's sometimes so hard to be mindful. Let the blowing of shofar this year help us be mindful. Help us activate God to judge us favorably, with mercy and not with judgment, with love and compassion, infusing all of us with peace and love, happiness and harmony for ourselves, our families, our communities, and all Am Yisrael and the world at large. Amen v'amen. If there are any questions, sorry we took so long. It was a very special edition. We normally don't have this. This is the finale. You could turn off. The finale edition of the year. If there are